Morning, everyone, and thanks for that introduction. I'm delighted to be here at what's obviously a major event in the procurement calendar. Today's really about making fresh contacts, speaking directly to suppliers for reaffirming relationships and taking an all-important check on the important issues that are impacting public procurement in an era of shrinking budgets and ever-increasing need. I'd like to use the opportunity of today to address some emerging and significant shifts in the procurement landscape of late, both the challenges raised for public authorities and the opportunities that these changes can create, and also to address the role of government in supporting us to adapt to this new environment. First, it's worth taking a bit of a stock check on the scale of local government procurement here in Glasgow and across the city region. I'm sure this will go some way to underscoring why we're here today, highlight the important role that everyone here plays, and really bringing into focus just how many people depend on the services that we all provide together. In just 1 year, 22-23, the total value of procurement spend across the 8 Glasgow City Region councils was a massive £2.7 billion. We're still working on the most recent figures, but in the 2 financial years up until April, in Glasgow City alone, that was close to £2 billion. In 22-23, that translates in terms of GVA across the city region of just under £4 billion and supporting almost 65,000 jobs within the regional economy. These, of course, have been a turbulent few years. Councils continue to see significant impacts to contracts and budgets resulting from a combination of Brexit, COVID and post-pandemic recovery, soaring inflation on construction costs, the conflict in Ukraine, and the impact of climate change. Overall inflation peaked at 11%, and in the last 2 years alone, the procurement team has tracked over 100 increases to contracts with a combined value of more than £21.8 million. Brexit in particular continues to create labour shortages, with additional checks on imports and exports adding to costs. For all that, the value of local authority procurement is really quite phenomenal, and the benefits can go beyond the direct financial impacts. Glasgow's economic strategy, for example, in addressing our most pressing challenges, identifies community wealth building as one way of encouraging inclusive growth. One pillar of community wealth building is supporting businesses to access opportunities through tendering, that is, keeping wealth and resources within our local communities. As a founding member of the Supplier Development Programme, a partnership between Scottish Government, local authorities, public bodies and the private sector, we've been working together to help Scottish SMEs find and, most importantly, win public sector contracts. At the present time, we have over 3,500 Glasgow businesses registered with the SDP. A whole event could be dedicated to social value and community benefits through our procurement approaches. Programmes like Glasgow Business Growth Framework, which draws out applicants' commitment to inclusive economic growth and includes small-scale businesses right through to long-established multi-million corporates. But I want to touch on the changing dynamics I referred to earlier. Approaches to procurement which have the capacity to deliver on the social and environmental need on a huge scale. It's a truism of the age that we're in to say that public sector landscape is shifting at a phenomenal rate. The pressure on finance and demand and the need for a closer alignment on public services to better secure outcomes, along with new and emerging shocks and changes, are forcing us to do things differently. Climate adaptation also means a wholesale overhaul of the fundamental systems which towns and cities have depended on for many decades, and the retrofitting of tens of thousands of buildings alongside the creation of new infrastructure. In Glasgow alone, these emerging pressures come with an estimated price tag of around £40 billion. So if anybody has large checkbooks, we'll be taking donations at the end of this. Yet for all that, the procurement landscape, so essential to delivering for place and people, remains quite static. As yet, it's really not clear how that critical function within local government is preparing itself to respond to these shifts in demands. Just to set out in a little bit more detail what exactly it is we're having to respond to. As host of COP26, Glasgow was thrust to the forefront of several key agendas within the climate emergency, perhaps none more so than climate investment. Basically, what needs adapted in the years to come and how we're going to pay for it all. What we've learned, and I should say many of our urban peers across these islands are quickly learning too, is that there's a lot of potential out there, a lot of potential investment out there to deliver on these things. In particular, institutional investment, which is looking for opportunities to add social value and contribute to these climate interventions. These are investors operating at considerable scale and not necessarily looking for quick or high returns. This is genuinely patient capital investment. Crucially, they want to work with municipalities, with cities and city regions in particular. Places like Glasgow and our city region can offer the necessary scale and investable propositions. Because for all that these investments might be patient, investors need the assurance that projects they are backing are commercially viable. But this new generation of investor isn't looking for something off the shelf. They want long-term relationships and partnerships with the places they're investing in. Perhaps the key point I want to make today is that there's a danger, I think, that current public procurement processes can be so risk-averse at times and complex that they might militate against the innovation necessary in this new landscape. Our CPU in Glasgow is the best in the business, and I would say that because I lead on procurement, but we have the accolades to back it up as well. But if we truly want best value for the public pound, then maybe we need to make the process a little less burdensome for them. Public authorities are understandably nervous about entering into these investment partnerships without going through a full-scale procurement process. But given the length and complexity of these processes, there's every chance that we might end up missing the boat. Major institutional investors are unlikely to be willing to wait up to 2 years at times for the outcome of a procurement process, which can cost tens and sometimes hundreds of thousands only to miss out on what might constitute best value. We can make a strong case that government should be supportive of and open-minded to local authorities who are innovating within the procurement process, and there needs to be an urgent conversation around what transformational change in the procurement process might entail, because there's clearly a need for greater innovation in our approaches. And if we're to leverage in the transformational investment to deliver, for example, new housing on public realm, or those critical climate interventions such as energy transition and retrofit, which every single local authority is going to need to become involved in the years ahead. It's also worth noting that colleagues in Glasgow have received feedback from investors that here in Scotland, local authorities can be seen as particularly risk adverse. Clearly, absolutely nobody wants to be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Processes are there for a very good reason. They're there to protect the taxpayer and public money and to ensure the accountability that the public demands of us. Indeed, we've seen in recent examples in England of investment recklessness, which have led to bankruptcy of local authorities. That's not something we want to happen and will of course completely guard against, but we do need a better balance than what we have just now, one that recognises that innovation doesn't necessarily mean recklessness. And to be absolutely clear, we're not talking about the public-private partnerships of the past. This isn't PFI. The investors we engage with are looking for something different than their predecessors of 25 years ago. Environmental and social value is now a significant requirement and has gone far beyond the box-ticking exercises it once was. These are increasingly bound by environmental, social and governance criteria and answerable to shareholders. Indeed, some of the institutional investors we speak with have been appointed specifically to deliver social impacts through investment. It's evident that as investors change and adapt, that we too need to change. We've got to be more ready and willing to take, manage and assess risks. And if that's backed up by public authorities, having more levers such as tax increment financing or land value capture, all standard practices across cities on the continent for major infrastructure projects, then better still. If there was a collective willingness in Scotland to combine these powers with institutional investment, it would allow cities and city regions to have more assurance and confidence that they can deliver for their places and their people, making sure that we, as a local authority, are in a position not only to attract that investment to the city, but to then make sure it's spent with businesses like yourselves, creating and retaining wealth in our communities. That's the bigger picture. That's what we're aiming for here. So thank you for indulging me, and I hope you have a good rest of the day and enjoy the exhibitions and the rest of the speeches. Thank you.